A Human Friendship Ritual, written by IAmTheHypeTFS. I'm going to speak with him. No, you aren't. Alex didn't even look up from his data state as he reached over and grabbed his Trixian friend and pulled him back down into his seat, preventing him from making its way over to the increasingly loud human getting drunk across the bar. Is your enjoyment not also being dampened by this man's verbal ejaculations? The human's face scrunched up at his friend's particular choice of words, but he was mostly used to it by now. The translators weren't perfect, and sometimes words in other languages just didn't have an equivalent, so they substituted it most likely accurate phrases. Shouting. We call that shouting, and yes, it is annoying, but you are not the right person to be confronting him about it. And why is that? Because that guy's had a bad day. It's practically begging for someone to call him out so that he can take out his frustrations. And you faint at the thought of a nosebleed. He wouldn't dare. This is an upstanding establishment with an excellent reputation. Fighting on the grounds would only end with his incarceration. Alex finally looked over at his friend and smirked, resting his cheek on his fist. Trixian was from a very orderly and mild-mannered race who held the law in high regard and could hardly imagine going against established rules in a fit of emotional outburst. Grabbing his spear, he got to his feet and gestured for Trixian to follow, taking the most direct route to the belligerent human while staring directly at the guy. By the time they made their way over, the man had already taken notice and was anticipating the confrontation. Someone finally got some balls in this place. Not sure why you brought that stick figure with you, unless you're planning on swinging him at me, even though I'm pretty sure he'd shatter on impact. Oh, he's not fighting. He's here to count to 10 after I knock your ass out on the lot. Maybe call emergency services too, depending on how stubborn you want to be about it. Come on out if you've got the balls. I don't want you tripping over a stool in here and using it as an excuse when you wake up. Trixian, hold my beer. Trixian stared dumbfounded at his companion as he skipped any form of pleasantries or negotiations for the man to lower the volume of his voice and jumped straight to antagonization. The growing red hue on his face at each inflammatory statement definitely showed the provocation was working, and before he knew it, Trixian was left holding Alex's beer while the two humans walked towards the exit, already shoulder-checking each other along the way. The first punches had already been thrown before his shock faded, and he scrambled to get to the door before it was choked with the other curious patrons. Alex was bleeding from the lip, and the other human was favoring his left side, clearly having taken a hard shot there himself. Alex hadn't been joking when he'd made the quip about Trixian's sensitivity to seeing blood, and the gangly alien dropped unconscious almost on the spot upon seeing the blood. When he next opened his eyes, he was back in the booth that he and his friend had occupied at the beginning of the night. But while Alex was once again beside him, they weren't alone. The loud man was sitting across the table, and he and Alex were in the middle of an arm wrestling match, each throwing out playful taunts between grunts of exertion. Both men were bandaged and bruised, but any blood had been covered or cleaned, so there was no fear of the Trixian having another fainting spell. It still didn't make him any less confused at how the men had gone from savagely beating each other to, friends. Is this how humans made friends? It certainly hadn't been how Trixian and Alex had begun their friendship. What happened? The alien was still disoriented, on top of being confused, and now wasn't even sure if the events before being rendered unconscious had even happened. He didn't think he'd drunk all that much, but none of this made sense, so it was the only thing that made any kind of sense. Hey Trix, you're awake. Welcome back, buddy. This guy right here who's about to lose for the second time tonight is Roger. Ha! I must have hit you harder than I thought if you think I lost this little scuffle. Maybe I should let you win this, to make up for the brain damage. Oh, is that going to be your excuse when I pin your hand to this table? You let me win. Go ahead. Take the second L of the night if it makes you feel better. I won't complain. The men continued to banter until Alex finally lost the match, and they both burst out laughing, only lowering the volume after being shot a look by the bartender. Roger took a swig of his beer and pressed the cold glass against his bruised cheek as he looked over at Trixian. Sorry about the old fainting thing. My ex had a friend who had the same thing. She saw a drop of blood and boom, out like a light. Though, maybe your buddy here should have had a bit thicker skin. Big words coming from the guy I'm pretty sure is nursing a cracked rib. Want to get checked out for internal bleeding? Who cares about a bit of internal bleeding? That's where the blood's supposed to be. You didn't pass basic biology, did you? Trixian just kept looking back and forth between the two as they spoke until he simply accepted that he wouldn't be able to wrap his mind around how things had turned out this way, and was just happy that no one ended up getting arrested. All of this was too much to take in, so he just let his forehead rest on the cool table, while the newly bonded humans continued to enjoy the reap the rewards of whatever absurd friendship ritual they had underwent. End of story. Story number 2, My Father's Before Me, written by Coyote Havoc. I found the chest when I was 7, playing in the house while my mother tended the family garden. My father had left before sunrise, as he did one day every year. I never thought to ask where he went on that day. School had just let out and summer was on its way. The adventures with my friends were more important to me. Summer was short, and school would return before we knew it. Plastic sword in hand, prepared to defend my ship, I walked through the house looking for stowaways and found the treasure in my parents' closet. Gold coins attached to ribbons placed neatly in a wooden box with a silver necklace carrying an angel. Another necklace bore my father's name and 2 plates. Between them, a casing, battered and dull. My father's treasures were so great, why hide them? Resting underneath the wooden box was a green jacket folded neatly and proud. A patch on the sleeve ringed in bright red, and a thin border of white in the shape of the plates that bore my father's name. There was an odd knife in the center, the blade held high from 2 snow-capped mountains, 8 stars at the top. 3 on one side of the knife, 5 on the other. Below was an eagle on a green shield. Shiny brass buttons held the coat closed. Each had an eagle with stars above its head. The talons held arrows in one claw, a branch in the other, and a banner in its beak. Pins on a lapel read support on a blue banner. Silver hands held an 8-point red star. On the right were little rainbow ribbons pinned above the pocket, bronze leaves on a few, stars and some more, a knotted cord in crimson and white, an M on cream and light blue, and a 4 on blue, yellow, and red. What did these mean? The right side had our last name below the red arrow that held a ship's wheel and a shield with a winged wheel. Spearhead of Logistics scrolled underneath it. On that sleeve, a black tab, airborne, stitched in gold, and a bald eagle screaming on a black shield. I put on my father's coat and found another underneath. The shoulders bore white diamonds, ivy leaves at the corners. The ribbons were as bright, but different in pattern. Green and yellow with 3 red stripes. Green and white with a silver scroll read 69 dash, something that had not ended. Another coat rested beneath that one, and another further still, all smartly packed away, but ready to be donned again. I put them all back the way that I'd found them. My father's treasures were vast, but were hidden for a purpose. At dinner that night, the colors and symbols still danced in my mind. Dad, what does airborne mean? That was the first time I saw my father cry. My mother's eyes went wide, but my father's just shed tears, his dinner forgotten. You were in the closet, weren't you? He asked. How did he know? Mom had not seen me, and he'd been gone all day. I placed everything back where I'd found it, to the best of my knowledge. I'll tell you tomorrow, he said, and picked up his plate before walking to the kitchen. I couldn't sleep that night. Was I in trouble? What would he say? The minutes ticked by like hours. The silent darkness passed uninterrupted until the first light of day peeked through my window. He knocked softly at my door. No time was left for worry and fear. The door opened, and my father looked out at me, still tucked into bed. The coat I discovered hung proudly from his shoulders as he sat on my bed. Get up and get ready, he spoke softly. Today you'll walk with me. I pulled on my pants and threw my shirt over my head before picking up my shoes and entering the living room. My grandfather was there wearing a second coat I'd found, a tear in his eye as he looked down at me. Kind of soon for him, isn't it? My grandfather asked. He has to know sooner or later, my father replied. We walked across town, my father on my right, his father on my left, laughing and talking about when my father was young. People stopped to watch this little parade, silent and knowing the truth I was about to learn. On the edge of town was the graveyard, grey markers on a field of green, but a flag flew proudly in front of a few. This was where my father went once a year, just before June. "This is my father," my grandfather said in front of a stone polished and carved with our family name. My father handed me a gold dollar like the one in his hand. My grandfather placed the gold dollar on the stone and stepped back to salute. My father followed him, their reaction the same, and I knew what to do. On the way home, we stopped at a diner for breakfast. People were passed to thank you between bites of pancakes and eggs. My father only nodded and my grandfather smiled. I knew nothing needed to be said in reply, and my father's treasures took on a more meaning than gold and silver ever would. The thunder of artillery rolls across this new world, far from the star that I knew as a child. My grandfather rests next to his father now, in that green field of stones, so far away. My father still walks across the town to lay a coin on their markers, and when I get home from this world, I will join him. My faith is in my rifle and the armor I wear. The men and women beside me are more precious than money or power. The adventures of my youth are replaced by the realities in front of me as we fight for a treasure more valuable than gold and silver, a future for our own sons and daughters, a legacy that we'll give them like my fathers before me. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.